My name's Guy Weir. I'm a statistician at which is the Consumer Association in the UK. I'll tell you a little bit more about our background for those of you that don't know in my first couple of slides. I'm going to be presenting with my colleague Mark Thurston, who works for a company called GeoFutures, who were our partner in building this the map that I'll show you a bit later. So just to give you a bit of background about me and Which as an organisation. Which was established in, I think, 1957, if I'm right, I don't know, nearly 60 years ago, as a consumer organisation. It was a volunteer organisation which aimed to basically try to push back against consumer detriment in markets, and most people will probably know it now as a suite of products that we put out. But primarily, there's quite a well-known subscription magazine which gives people kind of product reviews and a range of other kind of guides and helpful information about the consumer landscape. But as a organisation, it's set up as a not-for-profit. It's a charity, actually. So all the money that is brought in through the subscription service is basically put through our charity side of the business, which is where I work, and we operate as an apolitical social enterprise funded, as I said, by our commercial ventures. We don't receive any government money or public donations or fundraising income. We're there really to try to champion the consumer in. Whoops, I've just hit the. Oops, I had it. There we go. We're there to basically try to act as a lobbying organisation. We do lots of campaigning on behalf of consumers. Our overall aim is to try and make individual consumers, as powerful as the organisations that they have to interact with. In the charity arm of which we have a lot of campaigning work that goes on. We have our own kind of policy team area that aims to influence government, that aims to push back against consumer detriment, as I said. And driving that over the last few years, we've been really building our consumer insight function. So we have a team of researchers, economists, statisticians, looking to build that evidence base from which we can really kind of hopefully push the consumer agenda forward and really kind of generate positive change for the general public and consumers. So as part of all of that work, just laying out what some of the things that we do as a bit of a background, we have a monthly survey. It's a poll really of online of 2,000 adults every month, asking people about their consumer experiences, asking about their things around their general life satisfaction, their financial position, that kind of thing, which is I'll come back to in a minute, because that's the critical piece of information that we based our map upon. But we also have other things. So we've just recently launched a lived inflation index, which is taking the official inflation figures for the UK and basically looking at how they differ for different subgroups of the population. I encourage, if you're interested in that kind of thing, to have a look at that, because that's quite insightful. And we also have our own spending power index, looking at how consumer spending power has changed over time. We do analysis of the big government data sets and the national data sets, and we do a whole range of bespoke research reports on various consumer-related topics. So that's really the background to us and who I am and what we do. So the problem that we were faced with, so we've run a poll every month, 2,000 households within it, which generates us a lot of material to understand consumer behaviour, from which we base quite a lot of research reports. We do regular monthly reporting. We've managed to get a fair amount of press coverage and use that data really positively to inform the debate. But the problem that we really had, I think, is that we were missing a way of getting down to kind of local issues. Critically, we've got a really engaged membership base at Which, We've got people who support our campaigns, so we have a whole load of specific campaigns around, things like sort of energy, the energy companies, banks, unfair bank fees, that kind of thing, the payday lenders, all of those kinds of people. And we've got a whole bunch of people who are supporting those things. And obviously, one of the critical things that we're aiming to do as an organisation is influence politicians, right? We want to try and get in to speak to MPs and kind of really try to influence the way that they think, so that we can make a better outcome for consumers. But we didn't really have, apart from the headline UK statistics, we didn't really have a way of getting into local data for the specific things that we were interested in, because it's obviously just too expensive to kind of survey those kinds of numbers for the kind of stats that we'd need. So what we decided that we wanted to do was introduce a system where we integrated some geodemographic data to bootstrap our numbers from the survey, and then create an interactive map to show that data. And the map ended up becoming a bit of a monster. It was my own personal project that I worked on for quite a long time, and it went through several iterations, and it's turned out to be actually quite a nifty tool, way beyond what I'd initially intended it to be. But I think that the overriding idea was that we wanted something that would appeal to sort of a data savvy, web literate type of opinion leader, data journalists, intelligent layperson, that kind of thing. So the aim is not to be overly technical, basically. We wanted something that was really transparent, fairly easy to use. There's a lot of GIS tools, a lot of things out there that bring these kinds of data to life for people that have those kinds of skills, but they didn't necessarily, we thought, translate to a slightly less advanced skill set. So, just to give you a very quick basic dash through what I did with the statistics. On our tracker poll, we ask people about their financial distress. So we ask them a range of questions about how they're dealing with their day-to-day finances, and we group those issues that they're facing into a hierarchy on the survey, which we're calling the 5 levels of financial distress, or the niftily titled squeezometer, which has gone down with the red tops quite well. And they kind of start from level 1, where people are just saying that they're cutting back on their spending, through to using their savings to cover their spending, as well as cutting back at the same time, through to level 3, where they're starting to borrow from friends and family, maybe using authorized overdrafts or credit cards at the same time as saying that they're cutting back. And then the more serious levels, level 4 and 5, where level 4, they're using unauthorized overdrafts and payday loans. And then finally, we've said that the most serious is level 5, where people are saying that they're defaulting on their bills, they're defaulting on their housing costs. Things are pretty tight for them. So that's the initial starting point, is that data source. Claps together 3 months of those data into one 6,000 person sample, and then we basically then use the ONS's output area classification. We've used 2001. I know the 2011 came out just a few weeks ago, but we used the 2001 for obvious reasons, to basically extrapolate the statistics down to a really small area neighbourhood level. So for those that don't know, the output area itself was the census geography in the UK. I think it's, if I remember rightly, it's around about 500 households maybe. It's quite small, and so we can obviously, the output area classification basically as a geodemographic product similar to Acorn or Mosaic or those kinds of things, groups together all of those output areas into statistically similar types, which we can then, knowing the postcodes of the individuals that are on our survey, we can attribute each person to an output area, so then we can derive statistics for each of those types of output area, of which I think we used about 50 and had to collapse a couple because of sample size issues. But then once we've got that, we've got the patchwork quilt, if you like, of what we suspect would be the levels of financial distress for each of those measures on the left-hand side that we can then we can then estimate for all of these small areas within the UK, and then using that as the building block, we can basically then build up to other alternative geographies. So we've used the lower super output area, which is the statistical geography up from the output area, which we're calling our neighbourhoods. We've also critically chosen to go then the next level up to the parliamentary constituency level for obvious reasons, because we want to engage with MPs. And then finally, at the highest level, we've just grouped up to region with the devolved countries as the starting point for the map. So that's what we did with the statistics. I'll introduce, I think, Mark now to talk about the actual framework that we've used for the map. And then after he's finished, we'll give you a little look at what the map is and how it works.
My name is Mark Thurston, and I work at GeoFutures. GeoFutures is I guess we could call ourselves a geospatial consultancy. We're doing similar sort of work for the last 10 years as guys doing at Which, taking multiple data sets from a geographical base, integrating them and giving our clients answers. And we've got clients in both private and public sectors. And one of the things that we encountered was not dissimilar to what Which encountered in terms of their advocacy and their policy work, which is how to engage the policymakers, how to engage the people who are making decisions. Now, map data is a very good way of doing this. It's particularly since the advent of Google Maps, people are really understanding maps and integrating maps more into their lives. And it's a great way of expressing statistical trends and data. But again, we had the same problem. How do we engage the intelligent user, but without overwhelming them with too much technology? And we developed over the last 2-3 years an interface to basically communicate our consultancy results to our client base, not only for a specific client, but often across the whole organisation, which meant we got quite heavily into web mapping and delivering our analyses over the web. And it was just a fortuitous conversation between Guy and myself where I said, oh, have you seen this? And he got quite engaged by the mapping technology that we developed. The problem was, from our perspective, in terms of Guy using it, it was obviously extremely integrated into our databases and our data sets and so forth. So what we had started thinking about, and this project kind of acted as the impetus for, was decoupling it from our existing framework so that it could be published for anyone. So effectively, a very lightweight version of our technology could be published and hosted on other people's websites. And in this case, through an iframe directly on the Which Consumer Insight page. So we call this kind of decoupled technology map case, and it's the idea it's got to be very lightweight. In terms of its payload. We're continuing to use a Google Maps interface, particularly when using choropleth maps, because without the mapping context, it can be quite difficult for people to understand the underlying geography. And obviously, satellite imagery and so forth, as we'll see when Guy does a quick demo, is a very good way of bringing these sorts of data to life. We also needed to be sensitive to scale. And one of the things that we have is, and you'll see, as we zoom in and zoom out, the scale of the maps change. So the data geographies change according to what level you're at. And again, this is to make it easy for people who can use online mapping to adjust the scale of analysis that they're looking at. As you might expect, particularly with the rise of SVG, we've got connections between the map and the graphics. So you click on one, and the map you click on the graphs, the map highlights, and vice versa. And again, that's a kind of interactive side that becomes more important. We've also got more than one data set there, so transparency sliders to kind of see underlying data sets and compare data sets are there. And also, the key point at the bottom is the ability to create viewpoints. And what I mean by this is to actually save the map. Save the map at the correct zoom level with the data layers being shared so that this can be shared on Twitter, blogging, and on other websites as well. This is really important. In fact, when we published this, that was quite an important way of disseminating and increasing the profile of the app. For the technically minded amongst us, I think there are a few interesting points to just raise about this and how the kind of the technology domain is changing. So websites are more like apps now, and they're more and more like software. And obviously when we start using maps, a lot of the paradigms that we look at is geographic information systems. They're often very complex, and one of the key things for us to do when presenting map data is to pare that down. But actually, as we found, that's actually very difficult to do, particularly if your analysts are well versed in GIS and are used to the GIS metaphors. And it's something we're still wrestling with, is how to take some of the ideas of turning layers on and off and communicating that to the non-geographic analyst audience. Also, with SVG and JavaScript, it's quite messy. And one way we've got around this is to use the Google Web Tools framework as a way of actually delivering a very component-driven software architecture, not least because Java is a mature language. It's tightly scoped, and so we've found it to be quite a good way of packaging all our various technology. A lot of developers don't like Java though, because it is quite strict, and that's been an interesting exercise for us as we've been getting developers on board. I can't tell you the amount of developers I've said, oh, Java, I hate Java, did that at college, it was too strict, too difficult. But actually, we find that the overheads that it imposes on you actually bear dividends, particularly when testing later on and bringing different components together. Talked about the need for high-level functionality and trying to condense that as far as possible. And then you reach this very interesting point of payload. Geographic data is very rich, it's very heavy, let's say, particularly when you're using graphics and using SVG. We've got issues of the amount of information that we're sending through, particularly in terms of the number of coordinates with the polygons and so forth. And so we've always got this balance point between the amount of information, the amount of visual information and the level of generalization of the maps that we send through, and speed. And also, wherever possible, using tile sets, image formats, as a way of kind of cheating and getting some of that data across, some of that information across without overloading the browser. Final thing that we had to think about, particularly with Which, because of their brand, we knew we were going to have high volumes of traffic, and as I suggested through Twitter and so forth, this did occur. So we had to develop the architecture so it could scale horizontally in a cloud environment seamlessly. The final thing I'll just draw your attention to before I hand back over to Guy. Guy, I'll give you a mouse because it might be easier to drive. Is the whole thing of mobile technology. It's about 30% of the hits on the site came from mobile devices, and that's mobile phones rather than pads and so forth. And so that started to make us think about how we present mapping information in a mobile device. And we all know if we're trying to find a restaurant on our smartphone, it actually can be quite difficult to see the map. And I think that presents a whole new series of issues for us presenting data in map-based form over the web, because people will be ingesting that information on their phones. And we're working now to kind of just tailor our technology stack so it does improve, it does have increased compatibility with mobile devices. We're also, as part of that, looking at how we arrange the screen real estate and making that more flexible. And finally, full screen display, because ultimately people are expecting it to act like an app and expect web pages increasingly to act like an app, and that's something we're building in.
So this is what we ended up with then with the design of the map. So I forgot to say actually with the statistics earlier that what we're actually mapping is like a weighted score of the 5 levels of the squeezometer, the financial distress things that I discussed earlier. So in order to, obviously we only want to be mapping one thing, so we've turned those into one summary indicator, which is basically the score that is derived and then turned into percentile values for us to be able to map them against that data. So with that in mind, that's basically how our colour themes are put together. So obviously this is a regional map of the UK.
Why don't you try going full screen?
On this.
Yeah, that might just give us. Yeah.
That's better. Great, thanks. So, and what we have is obviously the map, as you can see, and then on the left-hand side we have a sidebar with the various more sort of GIS-y type things here, but obviously, as Mark said, scaled right back to be as intuitive and user-friendly as possible. So we have a little bit of information about what the data are, and then we've got our section down here where we start to see the kind of interactive graphs and charts, and then the other data layers that we can switch on and off. So that panel is obviously quite critical. You can resize to taste, or even make it disappear completely if you like, which obviously I'm not going to do. So, and as we can see, we are fully interactive here, so we can see from the map that our most distressed area here is the northeast region, I think followed by the West Mids and Northern Ireland and London. And then critically, as we do that, you can see what I've got here are the graphs of our 5 levels of financial distress here, which will then, you know, this is obviously looks like fairly basic functionality that you'd expect to see, but what's quite cool is we've also got the census under here. We've got a couple more statistics here about the percentage of people that we estimate to be worried about their household debt and how much they're worried about their savings and investments. And then just a simple pie chart giving a quick idea as to what proportion of the population are under 16, are of working age, and are of over 65. So that the idea being that you can then very quickly see how those, which plays out a lot more usefully when you drill down into the smaller area data, but which I'll do in a second. Just to give you an idea, so hovering over just obviously updates the reference geography, and you can fix it by just clicking on it, and then it stays put, which is quite useful. But where it starts to get more exciting, I think, is, let's find roughly where we are, is when you start to click in. So it's one of the things that is great about this map is how fast it is. It loads really quickly. We're now, where's Winchester? Here we are. So here's Winchester. And you can see, this is now parliamentary constituencies. So we can quickly compare, you know, the age profile of the adjoining parliamentary constituencies. Where's that little slider gone? There it is, thank you. And then obviously critically for us, we want to be able to look at how the different levels of squeeze are likely to be in these different areas. So it looks, obviously, Hampshire is a relatively affluent and quite well-off area. We'll see Portsmouth a lot worse, presumably down towards, we've got Southampton, yeah. Southampton's just here, isn't it?
Higher.
It's higher. Ah, got it, thank you. Yeah, so we've got Southampton as well, faring slightly better than Portsmouth. But we've gone further, obviously we've gone down to LSOA data, so we can keep going. So let's maybe look at Southampton in more detail. Keep drilling in until eventually it should redraw. There we go. So then we get the neighbourhoods of Southampton, and then we can start to really see where those pockets of financial distress are located and where we have the kinds of interesting neighbourhood differences that I think is what people will find so engaging and relevant to where they live, where they work, where they prospectively want to live, you know, all of those kinds of things. And obviously it gives, for us, trying to engage with campaign supporters and our members and critically MPs, it gives them a really good flavour of you know, what we think will be happening within their patch in you know, areas that they look after. So we can see, I don't have very much local knowledge, but hopefully maybe we've got a particular, we reckon that there'll be a more serious issue here with people defaulting on loans in this neighbourhood, in Southampton. So
Adjust the transparency.
and then that's right, we can adjust the transparency. We've got all the underlying kind of Google issues, so we can change from grayscale to. I'll have to do that.
Should we go on to satellite? So it's already on grayscale.
Oh, sorry, that's what I meant. There we go. Thank you. And then we can see the colour come in, or we can do the satellite imagery, and we can even drop, the person in onto the street view if we like, and it takes you into. So we've got all of.
Not on this one.
No, unfortunately not. But we've got all of those functions there, which is great. But one of the key features, which Mark said earlier, that we were really keen to implement. So I fiddled with my transparency. I've got my location set up here. If I was of a mind to, I could then just click on the share button here. It would generate a bespoke link for that exact view, which I could then copy, paste into whatever email communication, Twitter, social media, whatever I wanted, and share that with other interested parties, which we found really useful. So people on Twitter, when we launched the map, were sharing their own patches and kind of starting a conversation about the levels of financial distress that they found surprising within their own localities. So I mean that's the core data that we have, but also on top of that, we've also included. Let's go back to the grayscale background. We've also included a few other data layers. So we've also got census-based unemployment, which is also set up in the same kind of way. So it does. Why can't I zoom in? I have to use that. So it does also recalibrate itself to the appropriate geography as you zoom in and zoom out, which in and of itself is, I think, a really useful thing. Again, we can adjust the transparency if you wanted to have multiple layers on.
Too fast. It's given up.
Have I just?
It's all right.
Let's try and just.
I think it still kept the small.
It kept the small. Normally, it should flip over.
It should flip off.
At that kind of level.
So let's turn you off. And then we've also got indices of deprivation. So we thought that would be an interesting thing to be able to compare against our financial distress measure. And that was actually one of the things I'll talk about in a second that was interesting. If I've got time, I have to keep track of that. That Guardian found interesting was looking at those places that were hidden, the hidden pockets of financial distress within otherwise affluent areas. So that was an interesting thing to look at. And we've also included the original output area classification that the thing is built on. So it's all there to be able to really see the detailed patchwork kind of quilt of the way that the country is arranged in terms of its the demography of where people live. And it's just really fast, and I think it's quite a slick example of one of these types of maps. So we're really pleased with it. So how it's been used so far, really, just informing the debate. So we managed to get an exclusive launch with The Guardian. So we were featured on The Guardian data blog, and we also had a story in the money section of the newspaper based on the data, which was really useful, helped us immensely in publicising the site and getting our message out there. Other things that we've done with it, we've used it directly as a hook for an engagement kind of campaign in mailing out to MPs, where we've basically offered to help out by supplying other data from our tracker alongside the squeeze data and the map that is obviously publicly available. And we've also had a good reception from consumers and supporters generally sharing, as I said, sharing the bespoke areas of their own interest with colleagues and interested parties. So I think it's been really successful so far. I've been really pleased with where it's got to, but we've obviously got plans to continue developing and moving forward. So let me see how I'm doing for time. So I've got just a couple of next steps to tell you about. So we're looking to update the data that sits behind the map around about every 6 months, we think. And I'm going to incorporate the recently released 2011 output area classification. But I think one of the most exciting things for us is that now that we've developed this as a framework for this particular topic area with Mark, we've now got it to reuse for other things. So we can basically set up new, fresh, bespoke kind of views for other data that we hold. So we could look at other things that are of interest to us, like prevalence of private pension provision, savings resilience perhaps, other consumer engagement measures. We could even perhaps look at some of the consumer spending data from the Living Costs and Food Survey. We might look at how our lived inflation thing plays out at a small area level. We've got some really exciting options to be able to turn that data that would otherwise be locked into a UK-only reporting level to turn it into a tool that can really kind of bring it to life for people. And there'll be some other development work that we're going to be working on with GeoFutures as well. So we're keen to improve the annotation of the map. So we've obviously got the share function, but it would be nice to be able to drop in comments and maybe, where we're doing that kind of share thing, actually set something up so that we can say something more specific about what we're looking at and be able to share that as well. And we want to be able to embed more directly into social media. I mean, this is really where we want to be going. And we want to, at the moment, we've got a postcode lookup. We want to be able to improve that gazetteer so that we can look up place names and that kind of thing. And then in future, we may have different types of data that we want to visualize in different ways. So, talking to Mark about how we might, incorporate contour maps or different types of representations of density, obviously point locations and things that we can mash up with the data that we've got, and basically keep it, hopefully, growing and fluid and something that we can use to very quickly react to the kinds of things that stories and campaigns and things that we're working on at Which. So that's really it. If there's any questions, I'll be very happy to take them.
Question in the back, immediately springing up.
You're showing actual results at regional level and at constituency level, and then extrapolated results at LSOA level. Is that right?
No, all of the data are built from the output area classification. So the regional stuff is built from those data nuggets as well.
Okay, and at LSOA level, it's extrapolated based on the survey of 6,000. Looking at the 50 classifications and then saying this LSOA is in that classification.
Yep, and it's weighted via the household populations, the up-to-date household populations on the way to building the summary statistics for those geographies. Yeah.
Did you use a test, kind of the fact that you're presenting an estimate rather than real data, and whether people understood that it was an estimate?
We haven't user tested that. No, I mean it is clearly labelled in throughout the site that they're estimates, and that the way that we've messaged it has always been that these are estimates, and how the kind of thing that we wanted to do was to pose the findings as a question to people, really, and just how does this really chime with your own kind of local experience. So that's kind of where we're going with it.
I don't know if this is true of your data, but I wondered whether there's an issue of the estimates being equally reliable across all regions, or whether there are variabilities in reliability, and whether you'd sort of given any thought to how you could present that kind of uncertainty visually.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yes, there are. Obviously, there are differences in the reliabilities of the data. It's a survey-based thing, and also our survey is a quota sample poll. It's not, it's not a random sample kind of gold standard, all singing, all dancing source from the beginning. So there are clearly things around the data reliability that we would like to be able to display as well. But no, we haven't really cracked how we do that. But it is something that's very much on my radar. It's just how we show maybe the kind of confidence interval type thing that we'd like to be able to show. Yeah.
I had a question myself. You say you're planning on updating the map every 6 months or so. Is that the same rate that you are currently having these new polls, or?
So we do the polls monthly. So every month we release new data from the poll. But I would be looking to just because it's quite an intensive exercise to actually produce the data. So I'll be doing that once every 6 months.
So
with a collapsed sample.
right. Okay. So the collapsing and so on takes time, and therefore you want to have a smaller or larger times.
Exactly. Will it be possible to see the changes over time?
We'd like to be able to do that, absolutely. So that might be something that we would think about whether or not we could visualise in some way. But yeah, we'd very much like to go down that road.
As soon as you have your next set, you can already show a difference map, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the issue will be because so much of it is contingent on the output area classification itself. We'd probably have to think quite hard about, because we're modelling the data from the output area classification, so the differences that will be found, I'd have to think quite hard about how we would look at those, the reliability of those changes over time. But it's definitely something we'd like to be able to do.
If not, let's thank both the speakers again.